161. Don't worry, you won't die. The moment they breached the star's outer layer, God felt his skin begin to melt. An infernal heat closed around them. This was the star's surface zone, second only to the core in temperature, crawling toward 100,000 degrees Celsius. God tried to punch King and force him to release his grip. If we just rush into the core like this, the consequences for me will be unimaginable. King could adapt. He always could, but I can't. His blows fell uselessly against King, like someone swatting at a fly. Of course, God had forgotten. King had already adapted to his entire presence. Nothing God did could harm him. In sheer strength, God couldn't break free. King only pressed him forward more forcefully. As they charged deeper, King kept raining blows with his free hand, each strike detonating with power beyond a nuclear blast. God staggered under a few hits. White smoke began to rise from his body as the heat chewed at him. Between the burning and the battering, he was entirely on the back foot. With a sharp, almost clinical sound, the light around them flared and shifted to a pure, blinding white. God screamed as the temperature rocketed past his limit. In this part of the star, it reached beyond 500,000 degrees Celsius. Even the fabric of space seemed to warp. Even King's skin began to blister, then instantaneously healed in a flash of green light. Each collision between them briefly dispersed the surrounding heat, carving tiny vacuums into the searing plasma. After hundreds of brutal impacts, King's skin stopped melting altogether. He had adapted fully to the star's heart. God, by contrast, had lost his armor entirely. His flesh streamed like blood under a forging flame. If not for the tenacious vitality granted by the entity occupying him and his rapid regenerative capacity, he would already have been ash. This was bad, the guru within him thought, frantic and clawing at the edges of consciousness. Outside in the real world, the crisis was enormous. God was losing control. Then, after another savage punch, God was hurled backward. His armor shattered and fell away. The unbearable heat wrapped him like a noose, and his body began to burn through, intense, indiscriminate. As God screamed, something inside the consciousness space shifted. Guru's eyes narrowed. He smelled opportunity. He fought, brutal and sudden, and to everyone's shock, the weakened host failed to hold on. Guru wrested control back, sliding into the body that had borne him. King halted mid-swing. He looked at the figure in front of him, at the same features and posture, but the eyes and bearing had changed, and a single word slipped out, half question, half recognition. Guru? The man who was Guru nodded. The fire licked his skin. He grimaced at the pain, but forced a smile nonetheless. King, he said, I couldn't defeat you, and that frustrates me, but worse than failing is letting whatever's inside me run loose and commit genocide. Kill me, kill this body, and the monster occupying me will be destroyed too. It won't be able to invade this world anymore. Honestly, I have regrets. I never even got to be absolute evil, and now I'm about to die. He spread his arms, an expression of almost relieved surrender on his face, deliberately exposing himself to King's iron fist. Guru wanted to live. He wanted the era of heroes ended and to become the absolute evil for monsters, to usher them a savior. But he would not let that other thing return to Earth. The cost would be too high. If he couldn't be absolute evil this life, then maybe another, this life, he would be the hero who saved the world by sacrificing himself. King's mouth twitched into a smile. He reached out and patted Garu's shoulder, a teasing lilt in his tone. A great hero who wants to become absolute evil. You can rest easy about that. You won't die. I'm still here. I'm here! I'm here! As he shouted, King drove a heavy punch into Garu's abdomen. Garu's eyes bulged. He hadn't expected the man who just promised him he'd be fine to land such a vicious blow the next second. You. Before Garu could finish, King's fists followed in rapid succession, his voice almost calm as he said, Don't worry, this is a necessary step. If one looked closely, besides being swathed in blood chi as thick as a mountain, King's fists also flickered with a faint white light. Each time his fist struck Garu, a sliver of that white light split off and flowed into Garu's frame. It was another passive skill King had gained, soul immortality. Originally intended to pair with super speed healing to maximize survival, King had discovered an additional use. He could let his soul autonomously choose to emerge or return to his body, and the passive skill afforded that soul strong protection. Now he needed to send his soul into Garu's body to root out the god lodged there on a spiritual level. Garu felt like a slab of iron hammered in a forge, blow after blow, beaten within an inch of his life. After hundreds of continuous punches, he was almost driven into the afterlife. A massive gap opened in his mental space. At King's thought, his pale white soul detached from his body and poured into Garu's. King was met with an expanse of pitch black pierced by a faint light. Finally seeing Garu's mental space, he understood what had been happening in the arrogant youth's mind during the battle. A twisted, grotesque giant humanoid floated in the sky, and below it sat a tiny human reduced to pale bones. Heaven and earth seemed inverted. Endless divine power crashed like waves against that skeletal figure. Garu's will had been fighting desperately in that space. No matter how much divine power the god unleashed, his stubborn will refused to be crushed. The two were locked in a brutal struggle for control of the body. The displaced god kept trying to reclaim the body by attacking Garu's soul. King's sudden appearance shattered the fragile stalemate. The god turned its head in disbelief, staring at King as if its mind had stalled. The last time it had seen this was when it tried to reclaim the sun's sperm divine power, and that damn bald guy had inexplicably rushed in. And now you're here too? The god went on high alert, then recalculated. King was only in 7E form. His greatest strengths, immense blood chi and mighty physical body stats, couldn't be used now. That meant he was at its mercy. Pleasure at a potential victory swelled in the god. The humiliation of its earlier defeat could finally be avenged. It sneered. I really didn't expect you, the Four, to be foolish enough to abandon your strongest physical body to confront me, a higher dimensional being, in a 17 state. This is the dumbest thing you've ever done, King. You have already lost any chance of defeating me. I control most of this 7 space. This ant named Garu has already lost control of his own spiritual world. This place is easy to enter, but impossible to leave. You are destined to be terminated here. As the voice fell, the god withdrew the divine power it had been hammering at Garu and poured it all toward King. Spikes of divine power like a storm, surging waves of chaotic color across the sky, and pillars of colored divine power shooting out from every direction. King snorted. Blood chi flared across his 7 form, and his aura shredded the incoming divine power to dust. Seizing the god's momentary shock, King flashed forward and struck it with a 17 punch. Boom! The world seemed to change color as a howling soul wind tore through the spiritual realm. The god was sent reeling, its massive form smashing into the ground. King wasn't finished. He flew forward, planted his foot on the god's body, then leaned down and unleashed a blur of punches through the void, each blow detonating with explosive booms. Beating a fallen enemy, that was his specialty. Realizing it couldn't even defend itself on the 17 level, the god began to panic. Are you omnipotent or something? It never imagined King could release blood chi belonging to a 512 while in an ethereal 17 state. You're cheating. With the attacks on his soul halted, Garu's body, reduced to bone, regrew flesh and blood at a speed visible to the eye. In an instant, he was whole again. After all, a 17 body was largely illusory. Only the origin of the 17 body was real. This was his spiritual world, his home turf, so recovery was trivial. Seeing that tall, blonde figure pin the massive, twisted humanoid to the ground and beat it senseless, Garu hesitated for a moment. Then a savage grin spread across his face. King had interrupted his monster plan, crushed his pride, sent him to prison, ruined his long-planned hero hunting campaign, forced him to share a cell with that too, and defeated him in the most contemptuous way. A proud man like Garu could not tolerate that, but I really hate that high and mighty god. He charged forward, shaping his water stream rock's smashing fist, eyes flashing a golden light of excitement. Hey, King, don't kill that bastard yet. Save a few punches for me. I'm here. Chapter 164. Why has it turned into a cabinet? Ora, 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 ora! 2 figures had the massive, distorted humanoid pinned down and pounded it without mercy, their fists moving so fast they left after images. Garu remembered the agony of being tortured by divine power earlier, the resentment of being possessed. With every swing, his punches grew harder. King's eyes were full of rage, too. He couldn't help but think back to the days he'd been suppressed, forced to watch while God sent his minions to invade Earth, while King himself had been powerless. The memory stoked the fire in him, and his fists began to fly faster. Each blow made God's form cave in. King's strikes were heavy, each one chipping away at God's origin chi and leaving him visibly weaker. Garu's punches were less potent, but this realm was his home turf. Between his relentless assaults and his hostile intent, the plane itself began to reject God. Pinned and beaten, God seethed with annoyance, but he couldn't get up. The combined force of the two was overwhelming, and in his current state, a mere fragment of will, he simply could not resist. Damn it, these damned human bugs! God wanted to roar, but another set of combination punches landed across his face before he could make a sound. One assailant wielded possessed power already stronger than his. The other was the true master of this space. As a weak, higher-dimensional invader, he had no right to defy them here. Under the pair's onslaught, his figure grew more and more ethereal, a clear sign his hold on this realm was failing. If this continued much longer, he would be in real trouble. Even as a higher-dimensional being, God wouldn't die if his origin chi was shattered in this lower plane, but the loss would be severe. In that condition, he would become prey to other entities in his own dimension. The thought of being devoured made him decide to retreat. Thousands of years of planning, and his chance to invade Earth could be ruined, but if he stayed, his origin chi would be ground to dust, and his true body's life would be at risk. He had to give up. Watching the two still mounted on him and striking frantically, God unleashed a violent surge of chaotic, multicolored energy. King and Garu were forced to pause. Seizing the moment, God found a sliver of time to speak. His cold, grand voice echoed through the plane. "So what if you have the upper hand? I am God, an existence from a higher dimension than yours. No matter how arrogant you feel in this low world, you will never reach my level." His gaze fell on King as he spoke, a taunting certainty in his tone, as if convinced King would fail. "You, a human from a lower dimensional world, are impressive for what you are. Even a stowaway, your strength is undeniable. But what of it? Whether it's you or that bald head who breaks the rules, you are ultimately inferior. I will watch you forever from the higher realm." Ha! King immediately realized God intended to flee. Scanning the situation, he found no obvious way to keep God here, until an idea came to him. While God rattled off threats, King silently split off strands of his own origin chi and wove them into God's dissolving form. As long as a sliver of connection remained between their origin chi, King could track God into the higher dimension. How to reach that dimension? He'd have to ask the magical bald guy. If Saitama wanted to go somewhere, there was nothing he couldn't manage. It came down to the "I reckon" power. "Is that so?" King said, his fists never slowing as they flew faster and faster. "No matter where you hide, Saitama and I will find you and beat you until you're on your knees. Remember that." God sneered. His form had become almost entirely spectral, a sky of dissolving pinpricks of light. "Then I shall look forward to your arrival. I only hope you can cross the dimensions, you ridiculous lot." In the next instant, God completely dissipated. The remaining divine power flooded back into the void realm and vanished, all of it returning to the higher dimensional world. Having dealt with God, King did not linger in Garu's mental world. He returned to reality. He had to hurry. Before the divine power on Garu fully faded, he needed to get the man out of the star. Without divine power, Garu would revert to his previous weak state. Exposed to an environment of 500,000 degrees Celsius, he would be vaporized in an instant. Sure enough, without the divine power, Garu's strength began to regress rapidly. He was dying before King's eyes. The only reason he hadn't already been obliterated was the last remnants of God's divine power clinging to him. In those violent temperatures, only beings of King's level could survive. Any weaker creature would have been reduced to nothing. King scooped the half-dead Garu up. A massive surge of vital energy poured into Garu, wrapping his entire body in a scarlet shield. A stream of crimson light shot outward, carrying them away from the heat of the distorted space. King looked down at the lump inside the vital energy barrier. Blackened and charred, it barely looked human, and couldn't help but grumble. How did he turn into a piece of charcoal? Chapter 165. Do you intend to continue pursuing your absolute evil? Garu had been burned beyond recognition. His entire body was a lump of charcoal, his flesh coated in a layer of black crust. "Can you still talk? Hey?" King shook him a few times. Garu didn't respond, but he was alive. The kid was shockingly tenacious. Even King felt a grudging admiration. He'd taken a beating, then been nearly incinerated, and yet he hadn't died. More accurately, he wasn't truly harmed. The boy still harbored an enormous reserve of life force, buried deep in his 13. Unless struck through in a single blow, he could keep stimulating that life energy and come back stronger. King's crimson chi and blood flowed into Garu. Under King's control, the life essence moved gently, full of vitality, repairing Garu's ravaged body. The charcoal crust cracked and fell away in places, revealing smooth skin beneath. King had discovered through experiments, ever since beating the leader of the dark matter pirates, that his chi and blood could heal others. Perhaps because he himself had the talent of superspeed regeneration, his life force wasn't only destructive, it also contained abundant restorative power. Under the steady healing, Garu's breathing evened out. His yellow pupils opened slowly. "Where am I?" For a moment he was disoriented. Then, recognizing that he was alive, shock ran through him. "I'm still alive! Did we kill that damn 20? King nodded. "That's right, you're still alive. That 20 has been expelled from your body and can't invade this world again." Garu bowed his head, thinking. Then he noticed the scenery and completely lost his composure. Glittering lights filled everything around them. Am I really in outer space? He instinctively tried to hold his breath. Basic school knowledge told him there was no oxygen out there. But he found he could breathe. There was a layer of chi and blood shielding them, preserving some air. A wave of weakness pulsed from deep in his 19, and he clenched his fist. After feeling the power of the 20's body, returning to this weakened state felt surreal. "By the way, where are we now?" he asked, uncertain. "Is that glowing ball next to us the sun?" The naive assumption that even if they were in space, they'd still be within the solar system made King's expression darken. The truth was, he didn't know exactly where that bastard 20 had teleported them. But this was definitely not the solar system. Fortunately, he'd left an energy imprint on the bald demon king Saitama and could trace it. He answered Garu simply, "This isn't the solar system. It's a region very far from Earth. If we tried to return normally, it would take an extremely long time." Garu froze. Far from the solar system? How do we get back? He tried to dredge up the little astronomy he'd learned in school, the fastest speeds, the scales of light years, and panic prickled at him. Before he could spiral, King cut in. "If you're wondering how we get back, don't worry. I can tear through space and get us to Earth directly using 5. King didn't waste any more words. He grabbed Garu, who was still wrapped in the chi and blood shield, and thrust his right hand into the void ahead. With an explosive force, he tore open the space in front of them, making an irregular, silver-white rift. King closed his eyes and projected his consciousness into the distant cosmos, quickly honing in on an extremely faint energy trace. Found it. He seized Garu and leaped into the rift. The knife-like spatial cuts 5 slashed at them. King didn't try to block every wound. After weakening much of the damage, he allowed the remaining spatial tears to rake his body. Hundreds of cuts came, but the harm they caused him quickly became negligible, bare white marks on his skin. That way, he could divert most of his energy to shielding Garu and prevent the boy from being shredded. The world spun. King handled it. Garu, even with the shield, grew dizzy and saw stars. After nearly 10 minutes charging through the spatial tier, King's sense of the energy trail hit its limit. "We've arrived." He punched, ripping another hole in the fabric of space, and hauled Garu out. Before them floated an azure planet. King hovered in the void, a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. "Finally, we're back." Garu's face was pale. Nausea racked him. He looked like someone who'd just stepped off a long-distance bus. King glanced down and asked, calmly, "Will you continue to uphold your 6? Even sick to his stomach, Garu forced a grin through the vertigo. "Of course, I, the Great One, will uphold 6. I will defeat other heroes and show them that victory in this world isn't reserved for heroes alone." He emphasized other heroes, deliberately excluding King. It wasn't only because King had saved him from possession by the 20. There was a much simpler reason he couldn't beat King. Garu had watched King's performance in the 8. Even if he perfected the water stream rock-smashing fist to its 18 and grew through countless life-or-death battles, he could never defeat this monster. This was the man who had pummeled a 20 into the ground. The author is already crying inside. With the new year coming, why did the flu find me again? I've been coughing all day. My nose feels like a Sahara. There's another chapter later. Chapter 166. No? You really believe that? Hearing Garu's answer, King raised an eyebrow in surprise. Huh? You're actually going to do it? He'd asked casually, partly to see if he could change Garu's way of thinking. After everything Garu had been through, after seeing how the heroes risked themselves to protect Earth, King had expected at least a hint of being moved. And yet Garu still wanted to target heroes and become his own Bings. For a moment, King couldn't decide whether to call him stubborn or simply thick-headed. After thinking a moment, King said, "Have you ever considered that wanting to become 6 doesn't have to be proven only by defeating heroes? If you want to prove you're superior to heroes, violence isn't the only route. There are other ways, like joining the Hero Association and becoming an S-class hero." Huh? Garu and King stared at each other. Garu blinked, not understanding for a second. You mean, have me join the Hero Association and become a hero? Yep, King's confirmation short-circuited Garu's brain. He scratched his head in bewilderment. This guy, what is he saying? Me a hero? Seriously. Seeing Garu's confusion, King explained calmly. It's simple. S-class heroes are above the other ranks, so if you rise above all the S-class heroes and become 1, you've indirectly beaten all the heroes. Then, after you've successfully outclassed all the heroes, you can choose a monster identity and naturally become 6. What do you think? For a moment, Garu was speechless. Then, thinking it over, it actually sounded plausible. You don't necessarily need to fight your way through every hero. You could become one of them, climb their ranks, surpass them by status, reach the top as 1, then switch to a monster identity, and you'd be the greatest monster. That sounds perfect. No, that's certainly twisted reasoning. Garu finally reacted to King's logic. He was about to refute him when he noticed a fist the size of a sandbag unconsciously clench beside him. He fell silent. With a martial artist's instincts, Garu knew that if he pushed the point any further, he'd end up getting a bad beating. This wasn't ordinary ground. This was 8. King wouldn't need to do anything more than strip away the chi blood shield around Garu. He'd die on the spot. Realizing his life was essentially in King's hands, and that the man had personally saved him from possession, Garu felt a sick twist in his stomach. On one hand was his ideal, on the other, the benefactor who had saved his life and could easily punish refusal. And then there was that white-haired figure. Memories of the past flashed through Garu's mind like an old, faded slideshow. If he became a hero, the old man would probably be pleased. After a long sigh, Garu raked his fingers through his hair. Let's be clear first. After I become the 1 hero, I will definitely transform into a monster identity. That's without question. Sure. King didn't dwell on Garu's declaration. Whether Garu could really reach 1 was another matter. But even if he did, so what? To get promoted to 1, Garu would have to do a lot of hero work. Spending that much time among heroes might change his impressions of them. And if, after all those experiences, he still wanted to turn into a monster, that would be simple. He could pick between taking my fist or the bald demon kings. Just then, King remembered something important. Genos still hadn't registered as a hero. He'd almost forgotten about his cheap robot disciple. Apparently, the cyborg still wasn't on the Hero Association rolls. Perfect. When the time came, King thought he'd take Garu back, and the two of them could go register as S-class heroes just for the fun of it. Ever since his near-death and the body's enhancements from the 1611, Garu's strength had increased a lot compared to his time in prison. If nothing unexpected happened, the current Garu could beat Sexy Prisoner down within 10 rounds. Good decision. Then let's head back to Earth. With that, King became a streak of crimson light and shot forward, plunging into the 9. Garu, meanwhile, remained trapped inside the chi blood shield, bobbing and drifting behind King like a dog being carried in a sack. From a distance, it looked like a red crystal pendant with a little white-haired doll trapped inside, bumping around and seeing stars. Chapter 167. What kind of ultimate syscon is this? On Earth, amid the ruins of Z-City, Zombie Man, more or less whole again, had found a scrap of cloth to cover his backside and was squatting on a pile of rubble, smoking with a helpless look on his face. He stared at the line of heroes laid out before him and felt that helplessness deepen. What a mess. And why does everyone lie so neatly? After Sunsperm's rampage, every S-class hero there had been badly hurt and was basically out of commission. Zombie Man, who'd had his entire upper body blown off at the very beginning, was the only one still standing thanks to his absurd regeneration. At his feet, cigarette butts burned down to the filters told him he'd already smoked several. He scratched his head, glanced at his phone, which had mysteriously lost signal, and his mouth twitched. Signal's awful. The residual energy from several powerful beings hadn't faded, and to make matters worse, a brief clash between King and a god in space had accidentally taken out some satellites. The ruins of Z-City were suffering severe signal fluctuations. Contacting the outside world was a nightmare. After dozens of attempts, he finally got through to the Hero Association and had them send a big medical team. All he could do now was wait for help to arrive and check up on the S-class roster. Tatsumaki's psychic power had overloaded. She was unconscious, bleeding heavily from multiple wounds. Superalloy Darkshine looked worse, his proud muscles battered and bloody, fine cracks spidering across him like a shattered statue. Strangely, his glossy black skin still gleamed as if healing itself slowly. Flashy Flash lay out cold and unresponsive, barely hanging on. Bang had been knocked into a coma by Sunsperm. Atomic Samurai had almost been punched through. If he hadn't blocked that blow with his sword, he might have been turned into a donut, and was now down and badly hurt. Pig God fared better. His injuries were light, and he was refueling with an absurd amount of snacks. Nobody could say where he'd produced all that food, but as long as he was okay, it was fine. Sexy Prisoner, though beaten, bloody, and unconscious, still had a flushed face and was curled up shyly. Zombie Man's expression twitched, and he didn't dare look too long. Tank Top Master. Looking at the short, heavily muscled man smeared in blood, Zombie Man wasn't sure what to say. He'd heard a rumor about a treatment method. Acting on impulse, Zombie Man stepped forward, grabbed the blue tank top strap over Tank Top Master's shoulder, and snapped it twice. Twang! Twang! The elastic snapped back into place, and something miraculous happened. Tank Top Master's wounds healed visibly fast. Torn flesh knit together, broken bones set themselves. But there was a cost. When the healing finished, Tank Top Master's height had gone from about 1.2 meters down to roughly 1 meter. Zombie Man silently poked his own nose. He'd understand. Probably. Watchdog Man was on all fours, scratching his ear with a hind leg. His injuries were light, he'd taken fewer hits and still had plenty of strength left, though exhausted and a bit dusty. Zombie Man's eyes lingered on a child lying perfectly straight, Child Emperor. All his devices had been destroyed, but the boy himself was unharmed. The flaming figure hadn't seemed intent on killing him, a small mercy. Beside Child Emperor was Drive Knight, bisected at the waist. A single casual strike from Sunsperm had blown off his lower body. Only a huge crimson mechanical pupil kept rotating. His vocalizer flickered, as if trying to say something, but no sound came. It was clear the android was badly damaged. Zombieman frowned. "Where's Metal Bat?" He looked around and finally noticed a trail of blood leading away across the rubble, disappearing into the distance. Oh no, he knew Metal Bat, a stubborn teen of 16 or 17 who'd do something reckless just to prove himself. After taking heavy hits twice in a row, Metal Bat was probably at the end of his rope. Zombieman didn't hesitate. After confirming the other S-Class heroes were stable enough, he followed the blood trail. He ran across the broken road, stepping between smashed concrete and twisted rebar, eyes tracking the smear of blood. On a wider stretch of ruined street, he found Metal Bat. The kid's silhouette was unsteady, barely holding himself up with a bat that was already bent and cracked. He limped forward, each step dragging his body a little more. Blood ran from his forehead, dripped down his chin, and soaked into his once red clothes. "Hey, Metal Bat, your injuries are serious. Stop wandering and let me get you back to wait for help." Zombie Man shouted as he ran, but Metal Bat didn't even turn his head. He just kept going, as if he would walk until he dropped. That didn't sit right. No matter how stubborn, anyone would react to being called. Zombie Man rushed over, grabbed Metal Bat's shoulder, and halted his limp. He swung to face him and froze. Metal Bat's eyes had rolled back into his head. Blood ran from his temple and scalp. His muscles trembled, slack at the edges, all the signs of someone whose body had reached its limits. By Zombie Man's own experience of dying and regenerating, this was the look of someone utterly unconscious. And yet he was still moving. Closer, Zombie Man heard Metal Bat mumbling, his lips forming words so faint they were almost sleep talk. Leaning in, he just made them out. "My sister's piano recital. I can't miss it. She'll get angry." Zombie Man's eyes widened. Of all the things that could keep someone going past conscious limits, a promise not to miss a sibling's piano recital was what propelled this kid forward. What kind of ultimate siscon is this? Chapter 167. Chapter 168 was resolved so quickly. Metal Bat's strength surged all at once, wrenching free from Zombie Man's grip on his shoulder. The dreamy murmur in his voice snapped into a shout. "I'm going to see my sister's piano competition." Taken by surprise, Zombie Man was thrown off balance. His pale face showed a flash of helplessness. "Calm down." He brought up his massive, specially made handgun and slammed the heavy butt against the back of Metal Bat's neck. Bang! Flesh met metal with a crisp sound, and Metal Bat crumpled to the ground, his shallow breathing the only sign he was still alive. His body had reached its limit. It was only his obsession with getting to his sister's recital that had kept him fighting. Zombie Man's blow was the final straw, and the exhausted hero collapsed completely. Phew, looks like he's finally quieted down. Zombie Man stooped, slung the unconscious Metal Bat over his shoulder, and ran back toward the site of the battle. Even carrying a man well over 100 pounds, he covered 100 meters in just a few seconds. Among S-class heroes, he might be considered physically inferior compared to those with freakish strength, but that only meant he wasn't absurdly overpowered. In the original timeline, Zombie Man could bend steel bars with his hands. His strength put him at the top of A-class, and his stamina and endurance were terrifying in their own right. Before long, he returned to the original spot and laid Metal Bat down on the far right of the fallen S-class heroes, wiping imaginary sweat from his brow. He scanned the 10 wounded S-class heroes lying on the ground and felt an odd, almost childish amusement. For some reason, it felt like he was collecting Pokemon. A streak of crimson light sliced down from the sky and landed without kicking up dust. King stepped out of the blood-red glow. He had already come out of the Deathgate state and returned to Earth in his normal form. He raised a hand and deactivated the Chi and Blood Shield. Garu, who had been tumbling inside the barrier, was finally freed and collapsed to the ground. The instant he hit the Earth, he didn't look around. He simply dropped to his knees and began to vomit uncontrollably. Blef! Felt like I was in a washing machine for hundreds of cycles. Blef! Garu looked utterly drained, as if his stomach had been turned inside out. Zombie Man watched him with a wary eye. Who is this guy? He wondered. He looked familiar enough to put Zombie Man on guard. There were 10 critically injured S-class heroes here. Any sufficiently powerful being could finish them off in a moment. But King had brought Garu back, so there was no immediate threat. If King hadn't intervened when that terrifying figure appeared, they would likely have been wiped out on the spot. King would not harm them. That certainty comforted every hero present. Thinking of the aura of that other being and of the sun sperm that had already devastated the S-class heroes, Zombie Man felt his heart tighten. King, those 2 threats. Don't worry, they've been taken care of. One Punch Man and I finished them off. Solved so quickly? Zombie Man had assumed those things had merely been driven off or had escaped. They'd been capable of wiping out all the S-class heroes in an instant. From the moment King had appeared to save them until he returned, only about half an hour had passed. Zombie Man's estimate of King's power skyrocketed again in an instant. Let's not get into that now. King frowned as he looked over the 10 S-class heroes. Their life signs were extremely weak. They're all badly wounded. It's been so long. Why hasn't the Hero Association sent medical aid yet? Mr. King, you may not know, but the signal in this area is almost completely cut off. I only managed to contact the Hero Association after several attempts. Rescue teams are already on their way, Zombieman said with a bitter smile. I see, King replied. He looked over at the only 3 S-class heroes still able to move. A flicker of admiration passed through his eyes. These S-class heroes were terrifyingly strong, yet they were willing to risk everything to protect humanity, an attitude that deserved respect. You've done well, he said. Zombieman paused mid-drag. The cigarette in his mouth slipped from between his lips and hit the ground, scattering sparks. A warm feeling spread through him as he looked at the man who had just saved everyone from disaster. He smiled and met King's gaze. Mr. King, you really are a charismatic man. In Zombieman's view, true good heroes like King were rare, immense power combined with genuine compassion. King wasn't an ordinary human, an immortal experimental subject who'd escaped from the Evolution House, a literal humanoid experiment, yet he treated people with dignity. Zombieman's words were the highest praise he could give. King's expression stiffened for a moment. That sounded a little ambiguous. Never mind. These S-class heroes had just protected the Earth. Surely Zombieman didn't mean anything else. Before he could answer, Zombieman lit another cigarette and grinned like a warm breeze. Kind, domineering, and powerful. If I were a woman, I might have already fallen in love with you, Mr. King. King. They chatted a few more minutes, mostly trading updates about the situations they'd been dealing with. Then King noticed the life signs of several heroes weakening. He ended the small talk, stood, and knelt in front of Tatsumaki. The little green-haired girl lay on the ground, her aura faint. King placed a hand on her forehead. Given the situation in Z-City, it'll be some time before the rescue teams arrive. I'll handle the healing. His palm glowed with a deep crimson light. Vital, blood-infused chi streamed from his hand and into Tatsumaki's body. Zombieman watched in astonishment. Having died and come back more times than he cared to count, he had an uncanny sense for life force. The red light from King's hand steadied Tatsumaki's aura immediately, and it even began to improve. So Mr. King has a healing technique. What other secrets does he have? King narrowed his focus and extended his consciousness into her. Her brain showed serious damage, a clear backlash from overusing psychic power. Physically, she was largely intact, aside from superficial wounds and the fact that her small body had lost a lot of blood. After assessing her condition, King guided his blood chi through her, bringing intense vitality wherever it flowed. The energy began repairing the damaged areas. The tension in her expression eased. After about a minute, Tatsumaki's breathing steadied and the pain faded from her face. Done, King said softly. She should wake up soon. I've healed her injuries. But things rarely went exactly as expected. Tatsumaki's eyes fluttered open even before King withdrew his attention completely. She blinked slowly, the world around her warm and hazy, as if she'd stepped into a hot bath. What's happening? Am I dead and gone to heaven? Where's that thing covered in flames? She wondered, still foggy from unconsciousness. Something heavy pressed against her forehead, like a weight from above. Disoriented, she reached up and tried to push it away. King noticed the sudden movement and leaned in, worried that the psychic backlash might be flaring up again. He poured his consciousness into her, searching for any lingering harm. Tatsumaki shook her head, but the pressure stayed. She frowned and opened her eyes. Light pierced through the dust, and filling her vision was a face very close to hers, full of grave majesty. Ah! She screamed, and instinctively reacting with her psychic power, blasted outward. The force threw her attacker, King, dozens of meters away. She squinted at Zombieman, who had been watching nearby, and then glared at the dazed figure of King on the ground. Her face flushed, part embarrassment, part fury. You damn Scarface! You perverted, creepy, scar-faced King! What did you do to me while I was unconscious? King stared back, utterly baffled. Zombieman just grinned. Chapter 170. I've learned a lot. King watched Tatsumaki with a mixture of helplessness and amusement. Her cheeks were flushed, and she looked deeply put out. One look told him she'd gotten the wrong idea. Tatsumaki was undeniably attractive and petite enough to inspire a protective instinct in some, but King had no interest in that sort of thing. He waved a hand, deliberately showing no offense or anger at being misunderstood, keeping his usual imposing, composed expression. Tatsumaki, I meant no offense. I was only treating your injuries a moment ago, that's all. Slowly, Tatsumaki's flare of temper faded. She blinked, realizing that despite how badly she'd been hurt earlier, her vitality had returned and she couldn't feel any pain. King could actually heal people. She had completely misread him. Red-faced, she lowered her head, embarrassed. Her tsundere pride made it hard to apologize outright, but under King's calm, unreadable gaze, she folded her arms and muttered awkwardly. I'm sorry, okay? King couldn't resist teasing. He cupped his ear and put on an exaggerated look of listening. Tatsumaki, speak up. I can't hear you. Tatsumaki knew perfectly well he was teasing, but she glanced around. Only Zombie Man was nearby, took a breath, and raised her voice reluctantly. I'm sorry, okay. Still can't hear you. I said I'm sorry. She ended up shouting the apology in full humiliation. King nodded, satisfied. Sometimes teasing a child was good for the soul. It was time to wake the others. Over the next while, King moved from one injured S-Class hero to another, treating their wounds. One by one, they came back from unconsciousness. When Super Alloy Darkshine woke, he stared in silent horror at his battered, dulled muscles. The dark sheen that had been his pride had faded. He saw King at his side and hesitated, struggling to speak. My muscles, they're ruined. How do I stand before Mr. King now that the muscles I depended on are gone? Darkshine had always boasted that he was one of the top 3 heroes you couldn't mess with, and that confidence came from his perfect physique. Now those muscles were broken, his bravado crumbling with them. He felt his future collapsing. As he wallowed, Darkshine noticed the light above him dim, a shadow crossing his line of sight. He looked up, expecting some ominous sign, but the figure blocking the light was simply tall and blonde. Mr. King, why are you? You are lost, King interrupted, his voice flat. The words hit like a blade. Darkshine bowed his head, ashamed. He had always looked up to King. He didn't want to hide anything. Yes, Mr. King, I'm lost. The muscles I was proud of have been destroyed. The opponent was far stronger than me. How can I still believe in my muscles? King shook his head and laid a hand on the massive trapezius beside Darkshine's neck, speaking with steady seriousness. You're wrong about one thing. Your muscles aren't worthless. Then King began to steer him, like a tutor guiding a student. Think about who the mastermind behind this crisis was. The mastermind? It was obviously God, the one you blocked. Exactly. Hasn't God been driven off by us? We pushed God away from Earth. We were the winners, weren't we? Yes, we won in the end. The God who invaded was driven away, but then that's it. Humans won. You are human, so you won too. God lost. It took a moment for Darkshine to grasp the point. As understanding dawned, the light in his eyes returned. Confidence spread back across his features like a tide. So that's how it is. Mr. King, I have learned much. His muscles seemed to shine brighter again, his dejection swept away and replaced by triumphant vigor. Chapter 71. What are you doing? After the more durable Super Alloy Darkshine came to, the other S-Class heroes began to stir as well. Bang stared out over Z City, now nothing but scorched earth. His old eyes were troubled, his fists clenched without him thinking about it. Karanko, Bang's dojo sat in the suburbs outside the city, but looking at the ruined skyline, the mountain it stood on was probably flattened by the battle's aftershocks. I hope that kid got out. If it was only the dojo, Bang would feel grief and helplessness. If Karanko died in the aftershocks, Bang would carry guilt and blame for the rest of his life. He would never think it was Karanko's fault, only his own failure to defeat the enemy and keep him safe. Flashy Flash squatted on the ground in silence, his long blonde hair falling over his cheeks. He replayed the fight before he blacked out. That monster whose whole body glittered like diamond, who had crushed him so easily in the realm of speed. For a man who took pride in his speed, that was a deep wound to his pride. Worse, everyone said that diamond phase wasn't even the creature's final form. Later it evolved and became far stronger. Was my speed really so easily shattered? As Flashy Flash brooded, a furious piggish scream cut across the ruins. Gwa, why am I only 1 meter tall? Damn it, I'm not even as tall as your thighs. Where is that porcine voice coming from? Flashy Flash looked up and saw a short, muscular dwarf in a big blue tank top stomping and shouting. The fellow's face looked younger, but even with the garish tank top and the trademark short blonde hair, Flashy Flash recognized him instantly. Tank Top Master? He was covered in blood, but didn't seem badly hurt. Was that some kind of regeneration secret art? As a ninja, Flashy Flash knew there were techniques that burned the body to heal injuries. Elsewhere, King sat among rubble, watching the S-Class heroes waking up while his divine thought swept the area. The god entity had only been expelled, not destroyed. It made sense to be cautious in case it returned. The S-Class had no capacity for new trouble right now. What is that? King's divine thought picked up something plummeting from 10,000 meters up. He sat bolt upright, eyes sharpening. Such speed and such massive energy fluctuations. He was about to shift into his Deathgate form to investigate when he detected a familiar presence within that approaching energy. Oh, Bald Demon King. King relaxed. That name was a walking guarantee of safety. But there was another massive aura riding with him. Is that Sun Sperm? The Bald Demon King didn't kill this thing. He brought him back to Earth? The convergence of world lines is incredible if it can curve back like this. In the original story, Saitama tamed Black Sperm when the creature was feeble, but this Sun Sperm showed no sign of weakness now, still strong enough to one-shot any S-Class. To tame him like a pet? King could only marvel at Saitama. A blazing streak of light hammered into the ground, throwing up dust and a shockwave. Every S-Class hero snapped out of their daze, bracing for another life-or-death fight. A tall, roaring figure emerged through the dust, Sun Sperm. Every hero's expression changed to match a confrontation with a lethal threat. Metal Bat, despite not being fully recovered, grabbed his bat and barreled forward, rage on his face. Tank Top Master, now oddly only about a meter tall, glared at his own shrunken body, then squared his tiny shoulders and began charging with huge strides, bellowing, "Tank Top Tackle!" Tatsumaki's eyes flashed with murderous intent the moment she saw Sun Sperm. Her psychic power poured out like a howling sea, forming a sky full of spikes. "How dare you come back? Die for this, miss!" Zombie Man cast a quick look at King. Seeing King's face devoid of shock, he tensed, then relaxed. If King had expected this, there was no need to interfere with whatever plan was in motion. Watchdog Man glanced up at Sun Sperm, looked back at the unflappable King, then dropped his head and went back to scratching his ear with a hind leg as if nothing strange had happened. Pig God, seeing King's calm, resumed stuffing his face to refill his energy. Only 3 S-Class heroes attacked on instinct: Metal Bat, Tank Top Master, and Tatsumaki. And what they had in common was a temporary lack of prudence. Tank Top Master apparently shrank in both body and brain, paying no heed to King at all. Metal Bat's blood boiled when he remembered being casually insta-killed before. He rushed forward in blind fury. Tatsumaki, remembering Sun Sperm's earlier taunts and cruelty toward Blast, ignited in anger and struck without hesitation. Sun Sperm, freshly returned to Earth by his master Saitama, had barely opened his eyes when 3 attacks screamed at him. He froze, utterly bewildered. What's going on here? Chapter 172, Already a Pet? As soon as he returned, he saw 3 little ant-level figures charging at him, an image that almost made Sun Sperm laugh out loud. With one glance, he recognized them, the same S-Class heroes he'd easily dealt with before. In Sun Sperm's eyes, Tatsumaki and Metal Bat were on the same level, pathetic weaklings he could swat aside at will. He hadn't even intended to move, and they dared to attack? His instinct was to strike back, but his raised hand froze. No, he absolutely couldn't fight back. If he did, he'd be the one to get slapped down. Before his hand had risen half a centimeter, 2 cold, unfriendly gazes pinned him. One came from his newly acknowledged master, the Bald Demon King Saitama. The other came from a blond man watching quietly from a distance. Expressionless, he still radiated an overpowering, majestic presence that made Sun Sperm shiver. If he acted, he'd be killed on the spot by one of those 2. So Sun Sperm did not move. He let the attacks from Tatsumaki, Metal Bat, and Tank Top Master surge toward him. A breath of wind cleared the dust, and a shiny bald head flashed a blinding gleam in the sunlight. So much dust. Is there a construction site being torn down here, or has pollution gone that bad? Saitama complained casually. Everyone finally saw who was standing next to Sun Sperm. Saitama, One Punch Man. He had only just looked up to find Metal Bat and Tank Top Master charging straight at him and psychic spikes filling the sky. Why was he here? Metal Bat and Tank Top Master's expressions shifted in alarm, but they were already committed. Their attacks were on the way. What are you doing? Even as a welcome, this is a little enthusiastic. You trying to hug me or crash into me? Saitama said, stopping Metal Bat's swinging bat with one hand and holding Tank Top Master back with a single foot. Then he blew. A violent gust formed instantly, and a hurricane of force shredded the psychic spikes Tatsumaki had hurled. In an instant, the combined attacks of the three were neutralized. Sunsperm sighed in secret relief. It wasn't that these three posed any real threat to him. If their blows had landed, he'd still have shrugged them off. The power gap was simply too wide. He'd been badly beaten by Saitama in their previous encounter and had taken real damage, but he was still a bona fide divine rank monster. Tatsumaki, not even at the top of the above dragon tier, was nowhere near able to challenge a divine rank being. More important was the optics. If Sunsperm allowed their attacks to hit him without protest, it would be a huge insult and would show that Saitama didn't care about him, opening the door to future humiliation. If he fought back, Saitama and King, whose strengths dwarfed his own, would step in and beat him into a pulp. Having Saitama block the assault was the perfect outcome. It signaled that Saitama regarded him as a pet and avoided committing to either side. Seeing Saitama defend their former enemy, the S-Class heroes' faces fell. Throughout the whole fight, they'd barely seen any sign of this one-punch man, whose strength everyone said had no bottom. Was he gone from the battlefield? A terrifying thought crept into their heads. Metal Bat, impatient and hot-headed, was about to demand an explanation when King's voice cut across the field, calm and loud. Everyone, lower your guard. Saitama has already subdued him. Sunsperm is no longer an enemy. He's One Punch Man's newly acquired pet. Huh. Tatsumaki's eyes narrowed until they looked like slits. She stared incredulously at Saitama's bald head. This guy subdued that flame-covered monster? Give me a break. Tatsumaki remembered all too well how powerful Sunsperm had been when she faced him. Even as the Queen of Espers, she'd been unable to resist him, easily defeated in an instant. Blast had fallen to him too. Sunsperm's strength had been undeniable. But then Tatsumaki's doubt hit a wall in her throat. She had fought Saitama before. The memory was still fresh. She hadn't managed a single scratch on him, and in the end, she'd been defeated as if he'd been toying with her. If it was Saitama and King standing beside him now, then defeating Sunsperm should be possible, right? Chapter 173. They are the real heroes. In the end, the S-Class heroes had no choice but to accept it. The One-Punch Man, Saitama, had with a few slaps forced the Sunsperm, the creature that had obliterated them, to its knees and subdued it like a pet. Under the hostile stares of the assembled heroes, the Sunsperm lowered its head awkwardly. It could have wiped them all out with a single fart, yet being regarded so contemptuously by these weak, pathetic insects made it unbearably uncomfortable. Sunsperm, of course, understood why the heroes hated it. After all, it had left many of them in critical condition. After another dozen or so minutes, the Hero Association's rescue team finally arrived. From the helicopter, Sitch, his prominent nose cutting a worried silhouette, descended first. He scrambled across the rubble, eyes wild with anxiety. Zombie Man's report had said the S-Class heroes were badly wounded, some on the brink of death. The S-Class were humanity's trump card, the last hope. If they were wiped out, the world would be in grave danger. Still, Sitch clung to a sliver of hope. According to Zombie Man's information, the list of severely wounded did not include King. King had reportedly been holding back the mastermind behind this crisis, the entity known as God. As long as the legendary Mr. King remains, Sitch thought, humanity still has a chance. Even if every S-Class falls, King's presence keeps hope alive. At that moment, the life detection radar picked up signs of life. Relieved, Sitch hauled himself up a towering mound of debris and called out, "Everyone from the Hero Association, are you?" He stopped. The rescue team behind him froze as well. The S-Class heroes were walking steadily across the wreckage, looking hale and uninjured. Sitch watched them, baffled. Then the explanations came rushing in, and his world tilted. What do you mean the S-Class were one-shotted by that fire-engulfed monster? What do you mean King defeated God and then returned to heal all of you? And what do you mean that monster who one-shot you has been subdued as a pet by One Punch Man Saitama? A torrent of information slammed into Sitch's head. He rubbed his reddened nose, speechless for a moment, then closed his mouth. Maybe this was just proof of King's strength, and the One Punch Man he brought along was also unbelievably powerful. This was good for humanity. Realizing the crisis had been resolved, Sitch composed himself. He straightened, his face solemn, and bowed deeply. For risking your lives for humanity's future, I, Sitch, on behalf of the Hero Association and all humankind, offer our deepest gratitude and respect. Tatsumaki's lips twitched into a faint smile, though she waved a hand impatiently. Humph. A disaster like this. This miss might not have handled it alone. Lucky for you, King was here to help. Next time there's a major problem, this miss will still be first on the scene. Super Alloy Darkshine flexed his fully restored muscles, half squatting and grinning confidently as his sculpted form gleamed. Whatever crisis humanity faces, I will face it with my muscles, making sure the flame of hope never dies. Flashy Flash flicked the long sword at his side, golden hair framing a cold, handsome face. No matter what monster it is, my blade will sever its head. That has always been my way. Flashy's performance in the battle had indeed been brilliant. If he hadn't held off the enemy's strongest, Diamond Sperm, for so long during the 5 monster cadre's attack, the Hero Association might have already fallen. Atomic Samurai stood awkwardly to one side, a toothpick between his lips. In truth, aside from fighting the ugly president, he had few notable achievements in this fight. When he later faced Sun Sperm, he was one-shotted before he could react and badly wounded. Still, hearing everyone else make grand pledges, he clamped his jaw, accidentally snapping the toothpick. Whatever comes, I will stand with humanity. Any monster that threatens us will have to get past my sword first. One by one, the other S-Class heroes voiced their commitments. Without exception, they declared their loyalty to humanity and the Hero Association and affirmed their determination to protect people. Sitch watched, overwhelmed with relief. Emotion prickled at his eyes, and he wiped them with his sleeve. These were the S-Class, the pinnacle of the Hero Association, humanity's vanguard, the true heroes who stood in danger's path. King watched quietly, a faint smile on his face. Saitama, the bald-headed man, watched too, his expression vacant. Sunsperm crouched on the ground like a cringing lapdog, stealing nervous glances at the 2 quiet figures. What are those 2 big shots thinking? Will they decide to finish me off? At the thought, Sunsperm shuddered and inched a few meters away, afraid that one bad mood might make it someone's meal. Saitama glanced at the tall blond man beside him, one of the few opponents he'd found since becoming invincible and a good friend. King, he said softly, their pledges really suit them. They match my image of heroes. King patted Saitama's shoulder with a smile, his calm voice tinged with amusement. Of course they do. After all, they are the real heroes. Wishing everyone a happy Lunar New Year's Eve. Chapter 174. Wishing everyone a happy New Year. The catastrophe that had nearly wiped out humanity was finally resolved by the Hero Association. More precisely, it was resolved by the association's strongest man on Earth, King, and the suddenly famous One Punch Man, Saitama. The association, of course, didn't let the opportunity pass and immediately put the PR department to work, plastering the story everywhere. For a while, the association's reputation in society shot up again, almost eclipsing the government. The craze for becoming a hero reached new heights. People began to idolize heroes even more than pop stars. Under the Hero Association's storytelling, the strongest man on Earth, King, and the distinctive powerhouse One Punch Man Saitama became national icons. At the public's urging, and because of King and Saitama's undeniable achievements, the association decided to reshuffle the S-Class rankings. King, who had been S-Class rank 5, was promoted to number 3 after deliberation, leapfrogging even Blast, who had long been regarded as the pinnacle of the S-Class. This wasn't a routine promotion. The association's higher-ups had been reluctant to make such a bold move. At most, they might have bumped King to number 5, taking Tornado's spot. The direct jump to number 3 was possible only because someone personally guaranteed him. That someone was the mysterious powerhouse who had returned from space badly wounded. Blast, number 3. In front of cameras, he praised King's terrifying strength to the world, announced his own abdication, and publicly recommended a more deserving successor. The internet exploded. King's fame swelled immeasurably, leaving second-place Sweet Mask in the dust. He became the undisputed #1 in national popularity charts. People were convinced it was this legendary #2 who saved the world, who had prevented humanity's extinction. King was hailed as great and worthy of praise. Saitama, who had also done remarkable things, was promoted to #4, taking Bang's old spot. Why not straight to #5? The association's leaders had weighed it carefully. Although Saitama's deeds were dazzling, Tornado, the previous #5, had been fighting diligently on the front lines for years and had also performed admirably in the crisis. In terms of seniority and accumulated achievements, Saitama couldn't yet surpass the long-serving Tornado, so he settled for #4. As Saitama's influence spread, a curious social trend followed. There seemed to be more and more bald heads on the street. And these weren't the usual middle-aged balding men. Now teenagers were shaving their hair like him. They copied Saitama's look, convinced that being bald was cool, and maybe if they shaved their heads too, they'd gain the One Punch Man's strength. At first, Saitama enjoyed the extra pay and perks, but as time passed, he grew uneasy. He went from going out frequently to being cautious. He only dared leave home wearing a wig and holding it against the wind. Even so, he was still often recognized. His baldness wasn't the only giveaway. Those dull eyes and the plain, rounded face were just as iconic. After a while, whenever Saitama went shopping, he'd launch from his doorstep straight to his destination with a high jump just to avoid the fanatical crowds. Meanwhile, in a somewhat luxurious villa, King lay on a soft, spacious bed, staring at the faint blue data panel floating before him as the system's prompts chimed in his ears. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully defeating God, severely wounding him, and driving him back into the higher dimension. Option 1. Beat the god before you until he kneels. Let this so-called higher being who appeared in a lower dimension see that there is always someone better, and demonstrate the true meaning of a supernumerical monster with infinite adaptation. Option 1. Reward. System item X2. Random ability enhancement. Ding! Rewards have been distributed. Congratulations to the host for obtaining system item Real Man's Dual Scroll. Congratulations to the host for obtaining system item Anywhere Door. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a random ability enhancement. Adapt to Heaven and Earth has evolved into Infinite Evolution. Huh? An ability like that had actually evolved again? King felt a little overwhelmed. Am I really using cheats at this level? P.S. Unconsciously, this story has been written from early December 2025 until now. Thank you all for your company. I wish everyone a happy new year. May everything go well, work smoothly, and life be happy and beautiful. You can also drop some update reminders and little free gifts this way. Happy New Year! King wasn't in any rush to test his newly enhanced abilities. He decided to open the detailed descriptions of the 2 items he had just acquired first. If time wasn't pressing, there was no reason not to go in order. True Man Dual Scroll. Effect. Using this scroll forcibly creates a shield that cannot be disturbed or broken, dragging the chosen target into it to fight a true man duel. The space dissolves only when one party dies or when the scroll's initiator accepts the opponent's surrender. Special rule. The selected target must be a single individual. Our side, however, can include 2 or more participants with no upper limit. Escape is impossible until the duel ends, including by means such as phasing, micronization, becoming subatomic, or slipping into another dimension. Remaining uses. 1 King read the general effect and involuntarily sucked in a sharp breath. This was outright cheating. The item's name was downright misleading. Duel implied one-on-one, but the scroll actually forced one person to face multiple attackers and trap them in a sealed arena. The only ways the space could end were by killing the opponent or by the initiator accepting their surrender. If this worked on a god, no escape, and I can call in multiple allies, then couldn't I take Bald Demon King Saitama and drag a god into a forced duel? 2-on-1 against a god. King's pulse quickened as he clicked open the second item's details. Arbitrary Shuttle Gate. Effect. A gate that can shuttle between worlds at will, capable of locating alternate dimensions. If you have the target's coordinates, it can even perform tracking teleportation. Special rule: the gate is indestructible and cannot fail. Once placed, it creates a one-way passage. Only the gate's owner and their allied units may enter or exit. He stared at the blue data panel, eyes lingering on that last line. After a few seconds, a smile spread across his face and raw killing intent shone in his expression. God, I'm coming for you. With the shuttle gate and the dual scroll together, he could pinpoint a god's exact location in higher dimensions, force them into the dual space, and prevent any escape. The system really seemed to want that god dead. Even the items it gave him were tailored toward killing a deity. King didn't have time to wonder why. The foundation of all his power had come from the system. There was no reason to distrust it. Besides, from the system's attitude, he had a rough idea of what it might be. Even if his guess wasn't completely accurate, it was enough to form plans. Now then, he muttered, let's see what this most ridiculous skill has evolved into. He opened his character panel. Before checking the skill tab, he paused to admire the dazzling, overwhelmingly high stats that practically glowed on the screen. Name: Chen Xiao, gender male abilities. Emperor engine, super speed regeneration, fine control, energy control, indestructible soul, infinite evolution, strength 1000, speed 2000, stamina 2000, defense 2000, spirit 2000. Note: the standard for entering dragon level is all attributes reaching 10. Remark: you have reached a level of invincibility in the One Punch Man world. Even Saitama would need to be serious when fighting you now. You have only one truly terrifying enemy left in this world. Those numbers were obscene. Every attribute at 20,000, almost double what they had been when he first transmigrated. That was the result of adaptation and a perfect evolution of the body. After the battle with the god, King had maintained an absolute physical state to overwhelm it. Adaptation continued to raise his strength. To have a body that could perfectly meet any combat requirement, his stats had to reach all-around perfection. Under the continuous effect of adapt to heaven and earth, he had eventually evolved every attribute to the perfect value of 20,000. His spirit, which had lagged before, had finally caught up. Attributes weren't simply additive, they amplified one another. The lowest tier dragon levels averaged only 10 in their stats. When King first came into the world and obtained the Death Gate, his attributes had been around 10,000. Could 10 low-tier dragon-level monsters have defeated him then? Obviously not. If the current King and the earlier version collided, the earlier King wouldn't even need to move. The other would implode into a bloody mist by himself. After admiring his stats for a while, King reluctantly opened the skill tab and clicked on the newly added Infinite Evolution. Infinite Evolution effect grants incredible potential. Whenever you are oppressed, suppressed, or feel inner pain and distress, you will continuously evolve until you break through every barrier before you, racing through evolution to reach the pinnacle of all realms. Holy shit. Even King, who had seen and endured so much and whose mindset had steadied over time, couldn't help widening his eyes. He rubbed them to make sure he wasn't misreading. Had this skill really become that absurdly powerful? The original Adapt to Heaven and Earth had already been the most otherworldly ability he'd obtained. This Infinite Evolution, an amplified form of that, was on an entirely different level. Just reading the description made his head buzz. This was ridiculous in the best possible way. Chapter 176. Another battle? Everything was ready. The 2 items crafted specifically for gods were in hand, and the heaven-defying techniques had been stockpiled. Even so, King still had no intention of rushing off to find that god. In the last fight, he'd left a soul mark on the opponent, and he could still feel a faint spiritual connection. The new arbitrary shuttle gate he'd acquired could reach the other party's coordinates through any level of link, so there was no need to go searching right away. Ever since he'd brazenly entered the altar and been severely suppressed by that damned god, King had become much more cautious. He would not set out again until he was absolutely sure he could crush the opponent completely and easily. So next, he would properly refine his stats. Although his all-around stats had reached 20,000, King felt that was still not enough. After all, this was a world-invading god on its home turf. He decided he would not act directly until his stats were honed to the point of being peerless. What? In his somewhat messy apartment, Saitama snatched a slice of beef out of the pot with his chopsticks. The meat had changed color from raw pink to light brown, giving off a strong beef aroma and rising steam. He'd blanched it perfectly, exactly 7 seconds in the boiling water, so it was tender and smooth. Saitama chewed with satisfaction, then continued. King, you're serious? If I beat you, you'll cover my food for a whole year? And buy any game I want, with you picking up the bill? A few minutes earlier, Saitama had been about to enjoy a solo meal to celebrate a pay raise. But King had appeared out of nowhere like a ghost, and the solitary indulgence had turned into company. At first, Saitama had felt a twinge of disappointment, but when he heard King's offer, the gloom vanished in an instant. King nodded with a smile, and the normally imposing, majestic expression on his face softened a little. Of course. If you can beat me, I'll make everything you just said happen. In fact, if money can solve it, I'll handle it for you. But there's one condition. You have to defeat me, Saitama. Of course. Saitama finished the beef like a whirlwind, then jumped up, full of energy. Not only would he get the joy of a proper fight with a close friend, he might also get all those rewards, double happiness, both spiritual and material. Seeing Saitama agree so eagerly, King relaxed. He had never doubted that Saitama would accept. A man like the bald demon king, who lived for the thrill of combat and kept things simple, would never refuse such a proposition. Saitama shed his loungewear and, with incredible speed, changed into his signature mustard yellow hero suit. His white cape fluttered, his shiny bald head gleamed. What's the plan? Are we going to the outskirts to fight now? I'm telling you, King, I'm definitely winning this bet. King shook his head, a small smile on his lips. No, we won't be fighting on Earth. Our levels are too high. Earth couldn't withstand a battlefield between us. I've invited someone who can take us to a suitable arena and act as referee. A silver flash appeared beside King, and Blast, looking a little scruffy but wearing a white combat suit, materialized with a chuckle. Hello, I've heard a lot about you, the legendary and mysterious One Punch Man. Seeing you in person is far better than any report. Who are you? Saitama asked, completely blank. He didn't recognize the middle-aged man who had just appeared. Blast froze for a moment, taken aback that this One Punch Man didn't know him. He reminded himself not to be surprised. He'd given a public address recently and had even mentioned the strongest people on Earth, including King and One Punch Man. But this man seemed oblivious. He recovered quickly and extended a confident smile. Let me introduce myself properly, Mr. Saitama. I'm Blast. I used to be the number 3 hero. The current number 3 is your friend, Mr. King. Oh. Saitama's response was non-committal, but the three of them chatted briefly before Blast's expression turned serious. Gentlemen, I'll teleport you to a location about 1 light year from Earth. It's a huge meteor belt, a field of shattered planet fragments. Plenty of space for a proper fight. I'll act as referee from a farther planet. Ready? Blast shouted, and brilliant silver light erupted from him. Spatial fluctuations spread out and instantly enveloped the three of them. Chapter 177. A Serious Punch. In the deep starry sky, countless meteorites flowed in orderly currents, forming an immense asteroid belt. With a flash of silver light, 3 figures appeared there at the same instant. Saitama was about to speak, then frowned and pinched his nose. Oh right, there's no air out here. How are we supposed to fight? Do we hold our breath? Blast and King exchanged looks, unsure how to react. Shock registered on Blast's face. This was the first time he'd seen Saitama behave like this, and he was utterly amazed. King, however, had long since grown used to the bald demon king's oddities and showed hardly any surprise. Saitama had simply forgotten the common knowledge that you can't speak in space without a medium. He only remembered that he couldn't breathe. So he opened his mouth and spoke, yet his voice carried perfectly through the vacuum. As expected of Mr. Saitama, your miraculous traits are endless, Blast said sincerely. Human speech is normally created by vibrating vocal cords and transmitted through air, but Saitama's casual act was proof that he obeyed his own rules. He was, for all intents and purposes, a law unto himself. King couldn't resist teasing. Saitama, did you know? According to the latest research, bald people can actually breathe in outer space. Really? Why haven't I seen that online? Saitama asked skeptically. He let go, inhaled what he jokingly called space radiation, and found he didn't need to breathe. Joy lit his face. Wow, so going bald comes with perks? Believing King, after all, he was a friend, Saitama convinced himself he really could survive in vacuum. He struck a freestyle swimming pose, drifting through space as casually as if he were in a pool on Earth. Blast watched, stunned anew. Is Mr. Saitama always this ridiculous? His body hardly seems human anymore. King shrugged and then hauled Blast through the air toward the edge of the asteroid belt. It's fine. At least Saitama still looks human. That's enough. Blast, sent tumbling by the shove, was too stunned to complain. He activated his spatial power and teleported to a nearby floating meteorite. From there, he raised his hand and brought it down sharply, his voice amplified by his space warping ability. I declare the battle begins. At his command, a meteor several thousand meters wide came charging at extreme speed. Saitama casually threw a single bare punch and the asteroid shattered into a cloud of debris. He darted forward with the calm appetite of someone more interested in a game or a meal than a fight and planted himself in front of King, raising his fist. Normal punch! King's danger sense flared and he countered without hesitation. Their fists met midair with a series of thunderous impacts. Shockwaves exploded outward, pulverizing surrounding rocks and setting the nearby space to faintly trembling. For a moment, their blows locked, neither able to overpower the other. Then King narrowed his eyes and pushed harder. The increase in force sent Saitama flying. He tumbled through the starfield before stabilizing. Saitama looked at his slightly smoking fist, then at King, standing with his arms crossed in the distance. Saitama's battle intent flared like fire fed by wind. King, you've gotten stronger. Seriously impressive. He surged forward again, more serious now. Raising his right hand, he clenched into a fist, and hundreds, thousands of red fist echoes rained down like a torrential barrage. Each strike carried devastating impact, forming a crushing wall of blows. Consecutive normal punches, King answered in kind. He took a heavy step and crushed the void itself beneath him. Blood chi poured from his body like an ocean, coalescing around his fist, and then, mysteriously, transformed into brilliant gold. His fists shone like twin suns. Emperor Fist! Their hundreds and thousands of strikes collided, each blow tearing at reality itself. Had they not been in the asteroid belt, the aftershocks would have been enough to obliterate a planet. Even here, the area within several hundred kilometers became a literal vacuum. Massive meteorites were shattered into a rain of debris. Each of Saitama's punches was met and blocked by King, while King's Emperor Fist was absorbed by Saitama's astonishingly durable body. As the exchange raged, King realized something about their relative strength. With 20,000 in all attributes, his current normal state had finally eclipsed Saitama's unevolved normal level. He could still recall the days Saitama had chased him and beaten him like a dog. Now, he wasn't that weak anymore. The thought made him want to laugh, and his punching speed climbed further. Golden suns flashed through the void, each strike able to pulverize a meteor over 10,000 meters across. Saitama's expression shifted from dull amusement to genuine excitement. The vacant look was gone. He'd found a worthy opponent. Facing someone who could trade blows with him without being overwhelmed, Saitama decided to show respect. He stopped treating the fight like a test or a joke. His rounded cheeks sharpened, his gaze went completely serious, veins stood out on his arms, and immense power swelled within him. King noticed the change. His pupils tightened as a massive sense of danger spread through him. Serious punch. Amid his barrage of consecutive normal punches, Saitama's eyes went cold. His serious punch smashed out with an overwhelming, crushing pressure that threatened to obliterate everything in its path. P.S. Hehe, regarding this book, the author actually doesn't plan to write about the myriad realms. After all, the current combat power system can already crush most anime. However, it is related to the myriad realms. Just keep reading, and you'll see. Chapter 178, The Gate of Death Open. Seeing Saitama's face sharpen with sudden intent and feeling a spike of danger in his chest, King immediately knew this punch was a serious punch. Good. I want to test this too, see if my normal state can take a serious punch. He had already tested the normal series earlier. Even the consecutive normal punches could be blocked with little trouble. In fact, his current normal state had clearly surpassed the Bald Demon King's old normal state. That made sense. Originally, the Bald Demon King's normal form couldn't even kill Starry Sky Hungry Wolf. Before evolving, he had been weaker than King was now. As Saitama's serious punch came, King didn't hesitate. He raised his fist high, golden light flaring like a blazing sun. Emperor Fist! Their fists met in the Void Realm. The collision warped the world's colors as an incomparable energy storm exploded outward from them. Unhindered, that storm swelled at once, spreading for thousands of kilometers, shredding and pulverizing meteorites into dust. A somewhat disheveled figure was blasted out of the storm, tumbling and slamming onto a nearby rock. King lowered his head and looked at his limp right hand, expressionless. Even in my normal state, I still can't withstand a serious punch. His right arm was shattered, bones comminuted, broken into fragments. Compared to earlier, when a serious punch would have turned him into a spray of blood, his physical resilience had improved remarkably. Now, taking the blow head-on cost him at most a broken arm. Crucially, he had not used his full strength. A flash of green light stitched the mangled arm back together. A warm current surged through him, flowing into limbs and bones, bolstering his body as his stats climbed steadily. In that case, 8 Gates Death Gate, open! Blood and chi erupted through King, crimson steam rolling over his skin. His aura spiked, the pressure from it making the surrounding space tremble. The dark, silent starfield around them reddened like a wound. The blood and chi condensed almost into substance, filling the area until it felt like King's own domain. Saitama felt it and smiled. His white cape flapped wildly in the blood-colored haze. Impressive aura, King. You really are something. Looks like I'll have to get a little serious, too. They met each other's eyes and needed no words. Strong people shared an unspoken respect, an understanding of what it meant to stand at a summit and be met by another who had reached it. They rushed forward at the same instant. Yellow light and blood-red light collided. Serious series. Omnidirectional, serious punching. Saitama stepped across the Void Realm. His figure blinked and flickered through the starry sky, tens of thousands of afterimages trailing him in an instant. Those streaks weren't mere illusions. Each afterimage carried a charged, serious punch. In the next heartbeat, hundreds, then thousands of serious punches rained down in an overwhelming deluge around King. Chapter 179. Are these two guys even human? At that moment, an overwhelming sense of crisis exploded outward. Every punch was a serious punch. Was this the Bald Demon King's ultimate technique, omnidirectional serious punches? King's soul screamed frantic warnings, but his face showed no fear. Instead, an excited smile spread across it. Come, the stronger the attack, the better. The stronger your attack, the stronger I become. An eager curve shaped his mouth as his aura surged, growing wilder and more brilliant. Crimson steam rose from his whole body. In an instant, he unleashed thousands of punches in every direction, each one colliding with Saitama's serious punches with impossible precision. Seeing King counterattack with such resolve, every one of Saitama's afterimages seemed to smile with satisfaction and appreciation. That's right, this is how it should be. Fight! Enjoy the ultimate battle. Boom, boom, boom. The violent roars of clashing power echoed across the dark, lonely starfield. Web-like cracks crawled across the surrounding space and shattered a second later. Shockwaves of energy cut through everything nearby with unmatched force. Even a star like the sun would have been reduced to dust by the scale of their exchange. Countless energy vortices formed and torrents of radiant power gushed out. In an instant, a silver-white river of world-shattering energy descended, annihilating space-time turbulence itself. What ordinary people and even divine-rank beings treat with utmost caution was unmade, reduced to the most basic particles of the universe. Tens of millions of kilometers away, Blast watched the scene, his scalp tingling. He wasn't viewing it with his eyes alone, but had condensed a viewing screen with his spatial power, watching the clash like a live broadcast. In the next instant, the screen began to flicker, warp, and finally shatter. The space there had been torn apart. Even his spatial power could not penetrate the energy field the two had generated. A grave look crossed Blast's face. He had known Saitama and King were strong, but their current display exceeded any god awakened of the past. They had even managed to destroy God itself. Who on earth were these two? Blast had long harbored that doubt. He'd silently guarded Earth for years, yet had never heard of these two. If they had been this powerful all along, someone would have noticed. After returning to Earth not long ago, Blast had used his advanced permissions to pull up every scrap of information on Saitama and King since they joined the Hero Association. What he found surprised him. Before the association existed, the names Saitama and King barely appeared in any records. Their resumes were shockingly ordinary. According to the records, Saitama had once been an ordinary office worker who'd even been laid off. There was nothing remarkable about him. King's resume was equally mundane, just an otaku living a peaceful life, never displaying any terrifying strength. Could it be that before choosing to become heroes, both of them were hidden masters who wanted nothing more than a quiet life? Blast thought that was likely. How could anyone transform from ordinary people into such untraceable forces in just 3 years? Still, these two were absurdly overpowered. He no longer needed his spatial screen to observe. Looking up, Blast could see bursts of dazzling shockwaves tearing through the distant star field. Even the stars there were fading, their light dissipating in the collision. From Blast's vantage, the galaxy looked scooped out. The region where Saitama and King fought had become a vacuum. Then a violent shockwave crossed tens of millions of kilometers and barreled toward him. Blast's composure finally broke. "What the hell are you two? Are you even human?" He activated spatial power without hesitation. Dozens of thick spatial barriers formed around him, and multiple teleportation sigils flared into being. The incoming shockwave smashed through the barriers with brute force, surging forward. Veins stood out on Blast's forehead as he barely guided the brunt of the wave into a teleportation sigil and flung it to a far, empty corner of space. Phew, those two are real freaks. This confirms my decision to step down was the right one. I'm just an old man left behind by the times. The new era has to be defended by the young. Blast floated in the vast starfield with his arms folded, relief softening his gaze behind yellow goggles as he watched the distant, roaring ruin. He didn't regret giving up his position. Before the Hero Association, Blast had performed heroic deeds across the world and helped lay the foundations of humanity's present order. He was a hero from another age and one of the architects of mankind's current system. Naturally, he wanted humanity to grow even stronger. If it's these two, maybe they really can deal with the God problem and stop another invasion. As someone who had fought God for years, Blast knew that King driving God off Earth earlier didn't mean the danger was over. God was a high-dimensional existence. He'd be retreating to higher dimensions to repair himself and wait for an opportunity. If any weakness showed, he could strike again. The spatial power in that area is starting to recover. Lost in thought, Blast noticed the distant spatial field repairing itself and snapped back to the present. He hadn't forgotten his current job, to referee the battle between these two great beings, Saitama and King. P.S. Some readers said yesterday's second chapter was too short. Actually, the author updates at least 4,000 characters every day. I just got carried away writing the first chapter yesterday and nearly wrote 3,000 words. Blast raised his hand and activated the spatial projector. The scene where Saitama and King were fighting was instantly beamed across to the device in front of him. In the next instant, a violent backlash slammed into him. The spatial projection detonated into a spray of energy particles. The recoil struck Blast as if a tremendous force had been delivered through that medium from the distance. Blood seeped from the corner of his mouth. Hey, that's a little much," Blast muttered, stunned, while apologizing silently. "Sorry, King. I can't be your referee anymore. I don't even deserve to watch." To those who knew him, Blast was Earth's protector. To those who didn't, he was just a guy playing at being space debris. Compared to the two fighting out there, he felt like dust. At the place of return to silence, everything else had been extinguished. The strange silver tide of energy continued to surge without stopping, a terrifying current of power. At the heart of that sea, a vacuum nearly 10 kilometers across had formed. Rules no longer applied there. Space itself seemed erased, replaced by a domain fashioned by two colossal wills. Saitama and King were slogging it out in the oldest, cruelest way, raw, savage physical combat. Every blow the bald Demon King threw was utterly serious, far stronger than the punch that had split the atmosphere in the original tale. There were no flashy beams or theatrical effects, only the ultimate contest of brute force. Saitama didn't bother with technique or avoidance. He took a punch straight to the face. The impact made even the incomparable Saitama wince. Blood streamed from his nose. He wiped his palm across his face, and seeing the crimson, his excitement burst out. "It's been a long time since I saw myself bleed. First time in 3 years. I'm grateful to you, King." Those words sent Saitama's emotions surging. His power spiked, and his aura flared several times stronger. King's pupils tightened. Before he could fully react, Saitama's fist slammed into his face. Crack! Bone fractured with a sharp sound. With Saitama's enhancement, that punch was terrifying enough to smash half of King's skull in an instant. Immediately, King's passive abilities kicked in: super speed regeneration and infinite evolution. Green and white lights flickered together as not only did King's face restore itself in a blink, his vitality surged to a higher level as well. Hearing Saitama, King smiled, an expression that still carried that domineering majesty, even if it looked a little stiff. "You're grateful to me," he said. "I feel the same. After all, we're good friends, Saitama." No more words were needed. They exchanged a look and raised their fists. Everything was understood. Bang! 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 Within the arena of their colliding energies, every impact shockwave didn't dissipate. It stayed locked inside that zone. Their punching speed was so extreme, ordinary eyes could not follow it. Their movements reached a kind of stillness born of speed. King's fist struck Saitama's nose, producing a fresh, profuse nosebleed and shattering his nasal bone. But King's own wounds always healed oddly fast. It was a cheat even he didn't fully understand. And whenever King hurt Saitama, Saitama's battle intent flared higher, driving his strength to new heights. The empowered Saitama answered with a blow that punched through King's skull, sending 2 bloodshot eyes tumbling into outer space. Yet as his passives triggered, King instantly recovered and grew even stronger. Super speed regeneration let him shrug off injury and maintain absurd endurance. Infinite evolution allowed his toughness and power to climb alongside Saitama's. What would have been the original story's problem, copying strength but failing to keep pace with the bald Demon King, didn't apply here. Each time Saitama rose, King rose with him. The two of them were strengthening in sync. Chapter 181. Fireworks forged from a planet king threw another punch, but this time it didn't meet Saitama's face. His wrist was firmly caught. "Finally caught you." A surge of aura rolled over Saitama's body. His right hand squeezed King's captured wrist until the bones creaked. Then his other hand moved up and pinned King's head. Boom, boom, boom. Veins bulged along Saitama's arms as every muscle detonated with brutal force. He charged, driving King's face forward. With a crisp sound like breaking glass, the two smashed through space itself, plunging together into the void. Amid the silver wash of that primordial ocean, King wrenched free from Saitama's grip. The wrist that had been held snapped under his control, severed in an instant and reattached the next. The two resumed their exchange of blows, but no longer in the open starfield. They were deep within the universe, in a layer beyond surface space. Ordinary planets and galaxies existed above. Only by wielding enough power to tear apart surface space could one reach this deep region, filled with the void. Each wisp of that void contained enough destructive force to undo heaven and earth. Even a monster at divine rank would hesitate to touch it carelessly or face grave injury. In that vast ocean of nothingness, two figures flickered and collided ceaselessly. Every punch made the void surge. Every strike made it fracture. King's fist was trapped by Saitama, but he followed up with a vicious elbow that smashed into Saitama's eye socket. A cracking sound rang out. Saitama's eyes widened, veins bulged uncontrollably on his shining bald head. He gritted his teeth and shot 2 fingers forward. Just as King moved to dodge, the corner of Saitama's mouth curled, and 2 palms simultaneously clamped both sides of King's head. King felt something was wrong. His struggle froze for a beat. Wait, Saitama is using one hand to poke my eyes, and 2 other hands are holding my head. Where did this guy get extra hands? Looking closer, King realized energy-formed arms had condensed behind Saitama. Not one, but four. Saitama's two fingers didn't hesitate. They pierced King's eyeballs. The eyes burst in their sockets, blood gushing everywhere. King didn't waste time on such an injury. He shook his head and new eyeballs grew back instantly. "Saitama, how did you grow four new hands?" he asked with curiosity. Saitama found it strange too. He subconsciously clenched his fists and the four arms behind him mirrored the motion in perfect sync. "No idea. I just felt like I didn't have enough hands trading blows with you. And then four more showed up. They feel like energy arms." King could only think, as expected of the rules themselves. He had thought he wouldn't be surprised by any of Saitama's world-bending tricks, but he still hadn't prepared for everything. Time to invent something of his own. He activated his passive energy control. Dozens of arms formed slowly behind him, and his entire body glowed gold, like a descending deity. Now it was the bald demon king who lost his composure. With a face full of comic exasperation, Saitama pointed at the ring of hands behind King. "No way, King. Yours are way more excessive than mine." After a brief bit of banter, they charged each other again. In the depths of space, the two godlike silhouettes clashed, leaving burning power fields in their wake. If the void here was an ocean, a single spray from it would be enough to kill Boros even in his collapsing star roaring cannon form. Monsters below divine rank had no business on this battlefield. King finally found an opening. He grabbed Saitama's wrist and with a burst of speed, rocketed upward while clutching his round head. Bang! 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 Explosions and shattering sounds echoed as the two streaks of light tore through the void, broke through surface space, and returned to the open starry sky. "Master King hasn't been home for 6 hours. As a proper disciple, I should tidy the house and make sure everything's in order." Inside a large villa, a young man with short blonde hair wearing an apron muttered to himself as he quickly washed dishes. Up close, it became obvious he wasn't exactly human. He was a mechanical construct. It was Genos. He'd been staying at King's house for days, helping with chores. Even King admitted Genos was extremely useful. A perfect modern mechanical servant. Give him a command, sometimes not even that, and Genos would go out and take care of everything. Groceries, cooking, cleaning, laundry, dishes. He handled it all flawlessly. Dr. Kuseno had designed Genos as a combat cyborg, and Genos' original goal had been to become stronger in battle. But since he'd aligned with King, the level of conflict King engaged in was so extreme that if Genos were even nicked by aftershocks, he'd be reduced to scrap. He'd reluctantly become a household-type presence. Genos was content with that. To him, assisting his master in life's trivialities was part of his training. By studying how a powerful person like Master King lived, he could learn a path to greater strength. In short, he was a dedicated weirdo. Wiping the last bowl, Genos took off his apron, sat on the sofa, and looked thoughtfully at the door. "Master King seems to have gone out with Mr. Saitama not long ago. I don't know what they're doing, but they're probably playing video games. After all, Master King and Mr. Saitama get along so well, there shouldn't be a real fight between them." Bang! Saitama's face contorted as an unbelievably powerful punch slammed into him, blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. He was hurled backward, crashing into a distant asteroid. King didn't hesitate and pursued, a streak of red light plummeting toward a nearby planet. The moment he hit, the ground crumbled layer by layer. Spiderweb cracks raced outward as magma erupted from the shattered surface. Saitama brushed dust off his clothes and wiped the blood from his lip. His battle intent hadn't dimmed from his injuries. If anything, it flared higher. "Truly impressive. I haven't felt this alive in a long time. Again. He was enjoying the fight like never before. Since losing his hair and entering his invincible state, no one had given him a truly satisfying fight when he was serious. But his close friend King, known simply as King, could match him blow for blow, even surpass him at times. It was exhilarating. A streak of crimson flashed in Saitama's eyes as King's cold face filled his vision, a fist condensed with violent blood chi. "Good timing," Saitama laughed, veins popping along his arm as he raised his fist. Serious series, super serious punch. Their fists collided. For a heartbeat, the world fell silent, then an unparalleled explosion ripped out. A terrible shockwave wiped across space. The planet beneath them didn't last a second. its core shattered under the force. Fireworks made from the ruined planet burst into the lonely cosmic sky, blinding flames sweeping through the dark, yellow and red streaks clashing and scattering like celestial sparks. Author's note: I got carried away writing this one. The next chapter might be a bit shorter, but it'll still be more than the usual update.